A threat from Donald Trump to pull the U.S. out of NATO, triggering sharp rebuke from allies in that alliance. Donald Trump citing lack of support from those countries for Washington's war on Iran. It's not the first time, though, that he's made such threats, frustrated over what he sees as NATO's unwillingness, particularly in help to secure the Strait of Hormuz. Britain says it will host a meeting of around 35 countries to discuss reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Prime Minister Keir Starmer, meantime, pushing back on Mr. Trump's latest criticisms of NATO.
NATO is the single most effective military alliance the world has ever seen, and it has kept us safe for many decades, and we are fully committed to NATO.
And on Iran, Donald Trump saying Washington could step away from that war within 2 to 3 weeks. He's suggesting the U.S. could withdraw even without reaching any kind of formal ceasefire. If it's satisfied, Iran can no longer develop a nuclear weapon. The president is expected to address the nation later tonight, but Iran, though, insisting it has the necessary will and is prepared for at least 6 months more of fighting. Officials have insisted there are no ongoing negotiations with the United States and that it has not responded to a reported 15-point proposal from Washington to end this war. Fresh Iranian attacks on Israel, wounding at least 14 people, attacks as well across the Gulf, including strikes on an oil tanker off Qatar and fuel facilities in Kuwait and Bahrain. Israel striking back with explosions reported across Tehran. Targets included military and industrial sites, as well as a major passenger port terminal. Jagruti Dave is covering the story for CNA live from Washington, D.C. Jagruti, certainly not the first time we've seen Donald Trump signal displeasure at NATO, but possibly more serious given we're hearing the same from Marco Rubio.
Yes, certainly not the first time we've heard Donald Trump criticize NATO, but this time his criticisms take on a new color, I think, given the actions that he's taken on foreign policy. He's called NATO a paper tiger. In an interview with The Telegraph, he said he's strongly considering withdrawing the US out of NATO. He's effectively said that the failure of US allies to support the US in its attacks on Iran is shows the one-sided nature of this relationship when he claims that the US has gone to help Europe with the war in Ukraine and help Ukraine when it's not the US's problem. And similarly, now he's saying that reopening the Strait of Hormuz is not the US's problem, it's the Europeans' problem. And so he's told them to go get your oil effectively by yourselves. Now, Marco Rubio, as you say, has also sort of echoed, but not to quite the same extent, this prospect of changing US relationships with NATO. And he told Sean Hannity in an interview with Fox News, we're going to have to re-examine the value of NATO. If NATO is just about defending Europe if they're attacked, but them denying us basing rights when we need them, that's not a very good arrangement. He's referring to the fact that countries like the United Kingdom didn't allow the US to use their bases for preemptive strikes on Iran, and particularly Spain, who's not allowed the use of its bases, but also the use of its airspace for the United States, who's been particularly critical of the US's strikes on Iran. Now, can the US do anything? Can President Trump do anything unilaterally? Well, the short answer is technically no, because in 2023, Congress essentially passed a law preventing any president from unilaterally withdrawing out of NATO. It would require 2/3 vote in Congress, in the Senate, or an act of Congress to do so. Ironically, this law was backed by a bipartisan backing by a Democrat Senator Tim Kaine and also someone called Marco Rubio, who, when he was senator for Florida, saying that this was important, exercising important oversight over executive authority. Now, the thing is that the President Trump has bypassed Congress before, and if he does so, this would cause a real showdown between the President and Congress. The Congress would, some experts say, would have to escalate this potentially to the Supreme Court. what might more likely happen is a watered-down approach, this reassessing, as Marco Rubio says, which would maybe mean the US doesn't take part in military exercises, tries to undermine NATO, basically. So these are the sorts of options. But yeah, this is a really serious escalation in the president's criticisms of NATO, at least.
So maybe not a pullout from NATO, but Mr. Trump might have more say unilaterally on pulling out of war from Iran. He's due to speak, address the nation in the hours ahead. What kind of clarity might we look for from this address from Mr. Trump on the war in Iran?
Yeah, we understand from Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, that the president is going to give a 9 p.m. Eastern time, a prime time address where he is going to provide an important update on Iran. No other details. And if it's clarity you're looking for, you might not get it, because I think a lot of the president's critics have said that we haven't got clarity at all on the reasons for going into war in the first place. Mixed messages even now, whether the president is negotiating or whether the president is mulling troops on the ground by beefing up the military presence in the Middle East. The aims of the objectives of the war, again, lots of criticism for the moving goalposts. Marco Rubio, clearly frustrated by the reporting on the lack of clarity on the war objectives, brought out a list of objectives saying that, look, this is clearly why we are in Iran. And he actually omitted regime change, which was something that the administration had been, or at least the president had been talking about initially. So it's not clear whether clarity is going to be on offer, but we will potentially get some more information, at least, on what the messaging that the president and the White House wants to give on where we are, where the administration is with Iran, and potentially next steps, given that the president has indicated that it could be a withdrawal in about 2 to 3 weeks.
All right, we'll be looking forward to their speech in around about 12 hours from now. Jagruti Dave covering this story for CNA live from Washington, D.C.